bullshit you've been saying, you can stop it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Alright guys, we're on live with Second Shift Live episode 13. In this installment, we're going to be talking to Dr. Andy Galpin and Dr. Jimmy Bagley. I'm really excited to have you guys on. Alright, so tell us what you're up to currently.
I'll start off, I guess. So I'm Jimmy. I'm an assistant professor at San Francisco State. I'm starting my second year up there. I'm the director of a new muscle physiology lab, and kind of our goal is to do a bit of research, teaching, and community engagement in anything related to muscle and performance, sport performance, any kind of human performance type stuff. And yeah, we're collaborating with Andy down here. So.
Yeah, I am currently associate professor here at Cal State Fullerton with you two folks. In fact, like 90% of the reason I get to do most of the stuff I get to do is because of you, Albert, and you, Whitney, doing all the hard stuff for me. So yeah, we work a lot with Jimmy, and we run I run the biochemistry and molecular exercise physiology lab here, which is just a fancy way of saying we study muscle physiology, muscle metabolism, but we do it from the perspective of high force, high velocity, high power exercises. And so what we try to do is answer questions about very, very applied coaching-friendly things like why does this type of training program cause this type of adaptation while this program causes a different one. But we try to combine that with the sophisticated molecular aspect of it. So if this program made you jump higher, what is it that's happening in muscle that allows that to occur, or what really separates these elite athletes from pretty good athletes from the muscular perspective. And then we work directly with a bunch of athletes from a bunch of different sports, MMA, NFL, hockey, kind of you name it, to try and make sure that our information that we get is actually usable. So our lab is, and Jimmy's is the same, we do molecular and really hardcore sophisticated science, but we're really not interested in science unless it actually means something. So can this directly translate? Can I take my research and then turn around and say, okay, do this because of it, or don't do this? So that's what we try to do.
What are you doing currently? So we talk about collaboration a lot. So you're extraordinarily busy. How do you make the decision to collaborate with certain people, and how do you choose what to work on?
I'll kind of start that. I think, well, collaborations, for me, it happened pretty serendipitously. I know we talked about that fancy word, Albert. But yeah, so a lot of stuff just kind of falls into place. But if you're going to collaborate with somebody, you definitely want to have the same interest, right? Well, that's kind of a given. But you really want to work with somebody that you want to, sit down and have a beer with or have a meal with and hang out. I don't want to collaborate with somebody I don't get along with outside because it's not going to work. Yeah. It's a relationship, and it's kind of symbiotic. It's like sometimes you give, sometimes you take. Sometimes you have to travel down to sunny Southern California for a week and do research, so that kind of helps. But no, yeah, it's really just like a relationship, like anything, and a lot of times it just happens, and it's whatever you put into it is what you're going to get out, kind of.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's trying to select somebody who matches your skill set. In other words, I should probably say doesn't match your skill set, so has skills completely different from what you have. You're already good at organization, but maybe you're not good at creativity. Then you find somebody who's really creative, and then you can be organized. That's where people get massive amounts of things done very quickly. You try to find some people. So if you look at Jimmy and I, there are certain things that we both do really well, and there are certain things that I'm terrible at that he's phenomenal at. I probably have more of a background in coaching and being on the field, but he's got much more of a background in other things. And so it's about finding somebody who doesn't replicate what you do, but saying, hey, look, here's where I lack, and here are the stop gaps in my productivity. Oh my gosh, those are the things you're the best at? Perfect. So for me, I'm always searching for that. That tends to be very difficult to find. So you don't wait for that necessarily. We got lucky in finding that early on, and that was just straight luck. He just happened to show up in the lab I was working at, 8 years ago or whatever it was. But when it comes down to actually choosing, it's mostly about those things. Are they super passionate, and can they answer the same why question? So why are you doing this? And if they can have a similar answer to you, then you're going to have a really good match. If not, you're going to end up in different directions.
And I was going to say, even if you do end up in different directions, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like collaborations, like we plan on collaborating as long as we can, but sometimes you'll collaborate with somebody on one project and that's it, and you split ways and you're still good. It's not like, I think you just have to be careful not to think like if this doesn't last for 5 years, then it's a failure. Sometimes you just want one project and you're good, and then yeah.
So how would someone? I know you guys are both extraordinarily busy. How do you decide? Like, how should someone approach you? And I guess actually do this for grad students who want to work with you as well. You're busy. You don't want to be just dismissive of somebody, but how should they approach you? Should they talk in bullet points? Because a lot of people, I think, they'll just kind of, I want to talk to them, but I'm just going to sit there and, I don't know, they don't get to the point right away. So any recommendations that you can make for someone to approach you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, I'll start. The first one for me, honestly, is I know Jimmy's this way too, probably even more so than I am, but I'm willing to do about anything for anyone if I feel like the effort is matched. Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to do anything for anyone under that number. And so if I get an email from a student or from somebody else and it looks like some work I got to go do, I'm out. If it wasn't a well-constructed email, if there are spelling errors, if it clearly looks like you didn't look into this at all, you asked me a question that could easily be found on our website. I'm just not interested. I'm like, you took 10 seconds to do this. You didn't put in the effort. I'm not going to respond with the 10 seconds it takes to respond to that email. That's gone immediately. So just simply, honestly, being prepared is 90% of it for me. And that doesn't mean you have to read every one of our papers or even one of them. I don't care about that. But it's just simple, basic courtesy things that you're about to ask me to spend a bunch of time on something that I will honestly get almost nothing out of, like, monetarily or professionally, in which I'm happy to do that, but at least meet me at the start to say, like, here, I've done all this work, I've taken the time to send a decent email without spelling errors, and I didn't call you, hey, Galpin. Like, that stuff is like, you're out, I'm done, I don't want to match you at all. And honestly, that would be the same, Albert, for a student or for a professional in the field, somebody even higher above me. I'm going to get the same response either way. Like, you didn't really care to work with me that bad, that I'm not going to go out of my way. But if you do those things, I'll listen to pretty much anything. And the other part of that answer is people, Albert, people need to get a little bit thicker skin. Mm-hmm. And learn to take, I would say, not rejection, because I've almost never reject a student, but I will put a little test out to them. For example, they'll come with wanting something, and I'll basically say, like, okay, I need this to be done, which is maybe going to take them 5 to 10 minutes of work. Well, if you don't get that done, and I don't hear from you for a month, I know that you got more important things, or which honestly, legitimately could be more important. You got a kid to take care of, or whatever happens to be. But I'm just not interested in that relationship if it takes you 6 weeks to get back to that email. I don't hear from you for weeks. So for me, it's like, all right, show me that you're actually willing to do a little bit of work on something that isn't important, and then I'll put you in hours and hours of work for things that are important. But that's just a very quick litmus test for me of work. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly. I would do something like that too. Give them a small project. If a student comes to me, like, well, the first thing, obviously, go through and figure out, do they match? Are they interested in this? But then I'll ask, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what's your goals? Sometimes they have no idea, which is totally fine. I had no idea too. But if they're like, yeah, I'm going to apply to med school next year, this is what I want to do. So I know that they're going to be there for a year. They're going to probably be pretty driven, but they're going to be busy. Or they're like, I want to be a PE teacher or a coach. Okay, we can go down that road. I want to try to help them get to where they want to go while I'm doing what I need to do. And so some people I know I'll spend more time working with if they want to go into research and they have that drive. And some people, if they want to do something else, they might be working on something else. But I always ask, what do you want to be? What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. A follow-up too is, Jimmy and I are at Cal State schools, which we're here to teach. Neither one of us took these jobs because it was the only job we got. I had offers. I'm sure Jimmy was the same. For every single job I applied to, I was given the offer to go there, and I chose this one because I want to mentor. The reason why I didn't leave this, and I've had multiple chances, and I know he has and he will as the years go on, to leave this field, make more money, to do other things. And the number one reason I stay is because I actually like being around the students. So don't be intimidated by that. It's just, you need to be clear with my time. Don't walk into my office and be like, hey, what's up? Cool. How you doing? Like I'm not interested in that. I've got things to do. I'm happy to do those things, and Whitney and I have been out for beers and stuff plenty of times, and I love doing that stuff. But for me, it's about I have to make decisions, and I have to see a clear benefit here, the benefit could be for you. That's fine, but I just need to know an objective that says you're going to meet me when push comes to shove. I don't want to spend half an hour getting something prepared for you to not do it a month later. So that's really all it is. And if I feel like you're going to do work and you're excited to do it, I don't even care how good the quality of the work is. I prefer it to be good, but that's not the stuff that irritates me, honestly. It's just the matching of intensity, really.
Yeah.
So since we have an ongoing theme of networking on our podcast, when it comes to collaborations, are you guys doing more of the networking? Are you taking the initiative to network with these people, or are they coming up with you? So which one is it more of? You guys going out for that, or at these conferences and everything?
I think you have to put yourself out there as somebody that's willing to collaborate first. I'm not necessarily like looking like, oh, I want to work with that guy, so I'm going to totally go and like hound him and everything. That might happen eventually if you need like an epigenetics project. You're like, I have no idea how to do this. I need to find an epigenetics guy, and then you kind of look through your list. But a lot of it, like I think it happens more serendipitously. Back to our word, I'm networking all the time. We're always putting stuff out on social media. At Dr. Jimmy Bagley, at Dr. Andy Galpin, plug that in. So, you know what I mean? If people are following that, then that's our social network, is kind of our networking way. I think, yeah, you can't just look for a collaborator and hope, and if it doesn't work out, be all pissed off or whatever. It's just.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm this way. I think Jimmy is too, but I'll let him speak for that. I'm actually really introverted when it comes to that stuff. I generally don't like being around people. I do not like going up to people I don't know. If we have to go to a party around people, I don't want to talk to people. I'm horrible like that. So networking for me, honestly, is exhausting. It's against my nature. I don't want to do it at all. I have no problem doing that, but for me, it's hard for me to make that bound. And as an undergrad or as a grad student, that's just, even if you are extroverted, it still is really hard to do that when you see somebody is above your social status. So I think I can sympathize with people a lot because I don't do that. So ways that I have found for myself to get around that are to try to make the experiences much more organic. So it doesn't feel like you're walking up and saying, "Oh, hi, Whitney, I'm Andy. I want to work for you." Like, gosh, that just ends up being terrible, and the professor's like, "Cool, bud, I'm out of here." Right. So the strategies, simple things like a quick email that just simply says, "Hey, Professor Bartolini, I read your latest paper. I thought it was fantastic. Our lab's doing a similar thing, or I would love to work in this kind of a lab. Would there be a chance?" And you'd be amazed how many people are like, "Oh my gosh!" And even if that means you only literally read the abstract or the title for that one paper, you gave them something to talk about. So what I would actually say too is default to the people that work in the social sciences of communicating, and it's going to be the same answer. So, for example, if you were to walk up to a girl or a guy at a bar and try to hit on them, if you walked up and you're like, "So, hey, I'm Andy." Like, it doesn't matter how good looking you are, that's going to be super awkward.
Yeah.
You have to have something to say. And even if that something to say is goofy, or try not to be insulting and off the cuff, but so even if you don't really care about that answer, it can be the icebreaker. So that'd be the one I would do if you're like, I need to go talk to this person, but I'm super nervous. And the other trick is honestly start off by asking them a question. And let them open up about themselves. So, hey, I see you're at Fullerton. What are you doing out there? And that's all it has to be, and you could shut up for 10 minutes if you really have to. The other trick I'll give you, which is even easier, is social media has changed this world.
Yeah.
You can get at them on social media, on their Facebook page, Facebook friend them, and then drop them a line, comment on one of their things. And that will allow you to break that ice with them without actually having to do it in person, because that's so nerve-wracking nowadays, right? And if you're an introvert, you don't want to do those things, but you might have no problem commenting on their thing, or retweeting or posting one of their papers and then tagging them and saying, "Hey, this is an awesome paper," whatever. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. So I would use that to your advantage. Play to your shyness and play to your social media. People aren't creeped out by that anymore, so use it.
So it seems to me that you guys are you're not necessarily in just the realm of I'm a researcher. I deal with exclusively researchers. So going to what you're talking about in terms of social media or social networking, you guys do use social media a lot, and it seems to me that you write a lot of papers that aren't exclusively for researchers. So you're gearing a lot of it towards real people that are maybe don't have the time to do the research. So when did you start getting that, and why did you start doing that, if you have been doing that?
I think science is changing with social media and with all the technology and everything. And my whole thing is I hate the idea of knowledge being locked up in that ivory tower, and everybody's just intimidated because there's big, lingo, words you don't understand. Obviously, you go to school for 10 years so you can learn the scientific method and you can learn facts, but it's not really about that. I think that people with the general knowledge and that have the ability to learn can pretty much learn anything if they want to. I just don't think there's an outlet for them to get it. So that's why we use social media. We're not going to post up a whole article, but if we find something really cool and interesting, we might post up some bullet points. If you're more interested, check out the results section, blah, blah, blah. It's just, we're almost curating stuff as well as making our own primary content. So that's what I try to do, a little bit of both.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my onset since the beginning, is I always wanted to make things that are actually usable. That's not to demean the more basic sciences that aren't necessarily totally applicable. Not at all. We can make the argument that both of these are important, but for me, that's just what drives my passion, so I stick to that. But I would agree, Jimmy, we're both on the same page there, that as much as people don't think, I will fundamentally disagree with this idea the rest of my life, and I think that it's bearing fruit now that people actually like science. People like to be challenged a little bit. People like to be talked at just above their level, or sometimes way over their head. Right, but then you got to sort of be at their level. So I think that people have always thought, well, science is boring, we won't get it. But if you look at people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you look at people, Carl Sagan did it years ago. Even Tim Ferriss, Rhonda Patrick, they're showing clearly there is a huge appreciation for science, and I don't mean necessarily our science, for anything that's complicated. People like that. People like to be mystified a little bit. And so for us, it's about saying, you know what? All these years, people have basically said no one's interested in reading this stuff. It's boring. Well, my argument is that's because you're writing it boring. You're making it boring. I think we can make this stuff exciting. We're just not using the avenues. When I post a link or a thing about one of our new papers, we get hundreds or thousands of retweets and likes, and people are like, this is amazing. Well, the reason we didn't get it before is because we weren't sharing it. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like, well, why are we doing this then? Why am I going to spend? I think there was a paper that came out 3 or 4 years ago that said something like, on average, 7 to 10 people will read a peer-reviewed published paper. 7 to 10. Mm-hmm. So you're like, I'm going to spend 2 years on a project, and who knows how many thousands of dollars for 7 to 10 people to read it? I can throw it up on my Instagram and get 100 likes in 10 minutes. I just did tenfold the viewership. So for me, it's like, why are we doing this if no one's going to see it, no one's going to read it, why are we doing it?
Yeah, and I think publications have changed a lot too. Now there's a lot of open access. So, journals usually have to pay for a subscription to the journal or pay per article, which is like $30 an article. Nobody's going to buy that. If they're not affiliated with the university or some institution they can get stuff from, it's really difficult. But with things like ResearchGate, with open access journals where the authors pay to make it free for everybody, as that stuff gets more popular, I think it's just going to change the way research is published. It's already changing. But,
yeah. I mean, if you look at somebody, I can't remember who said it, Peter D. Manis maybe, but his vision was in 5 years for all of science to be free. Hmm. So they're trying to deconstruct. And if you look at the model, so what basically happens is when we do a study, the reason you have to pay for it is because some journal is curating it, and that costs money. And so they're basically saying, well, the only way to protect that is to only give it to people who pay this money. And I get that, understand it from their perspective, but that model is broken. It's like the taxi service being like, no, we got to make Uber illegal. Or we just realize that our model is terrible and broken, and it's gone. Now we have to adjust. And I think that's what science is at right now, realizing this model of charging people $20 to read an article is gone. There's too much free knowledge. If the option is pay $20 to read this piece of knowledge or pay nothing to read exponential knowledge, there's no way I'm going to pay that. And so I think that's going to be changed, and I would be shocked if in a decade anyone has to pay for these anymore, ever. They're going to find a different way to fund them, and science will be free in a decade, and as it should be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've given that some thought too, because a lot of people will misinterpret what the research tells us, and they don't know how to interpret the research, yet there'll be like an article in it in Fitness Magazine or articles like that. So do you think he could play a part in that discrediting that misinformation, or what role do we have as practitioners and scientists in discrediting that?
I think the one thing you have to do is no single article is going to prove anything. Like in science, you can't prove something. It's never proven. What we know now, we always talk about this. This is science as we know it today. Tomorrow it may change. It may change. So if somebody reads an article,
yeah, we talked about that. Yeah,
it says that like, oh, you know, whatever vitamin cures this cancer. Okay, well maybe in that small population of that study that actually did happen, maybe not. But you just can't. And I'm going to go take this vitamin. It's going to work for me. You have to take the whole body of knowledge, and that's where people like professors come in, because hopefully we know a lot about one certain body of knowledge and we can help disseminate that.
Yeah, there's a saying I use, and I think it was Carl Sagan. I mean, you never know with internet sayings who actually said it. Yeah. But he's got a famous quote that is along the lines of that science is not a body of knowledge, it's a way of thinking. And so whenever I hear something like people make these comments, I'm like, you're not even understanding what science is. Science is not knowledge. Science is an approach, and so we have to treat it just like that. For me, if you look at the classic definition of the evidence-based approach, right? That's what everyone talks about, right? Well, that doesn't mean science is your answer. Evidence-based approach means I will use science as a portion of my answer. I will also use my personal experience, and I will also use the experience of elite practitioners in the field, and I will combine all three of those to then make my best decision. But the reality of it is, Albert, it's always a guess. I mean, you know this. You've coached 1,000 athletes. It is always a guess, whether it's nutrition or your training program. You're trying to make the best guess possible, and you should use your experience combined with the research and combined with what other people are telling you that have done it, and say, okay, based on this, I'm going to make the best guess possible to do this. And then you have to realize, though, that that is just a guess. And so if it's not working, you have to be able to acknowledge that and say, well, maybe this is going on or this is going on. We need to change our approach. But you have to keep that fundamental understanding that there is no answer. There never will be an answer. You just have an educated guess, and that's what science was always supposed to be, is let's put you in the right direction, see if it works, see if it doesn't, test, retest, redesign, reform, remodel, try again. So that to me is the biggest thing that we can get through to, whether it's undergrads, grad students, or parents at home. It is saying that's our model, and this is simply giving us a starting place that will work most people most of the time. But your kid isn't most people. Your kid is your kid. You know, you are you. And so just because it works for the average, it may or may not work for you, which is really exciting about the new fields of nutrigenomics and epigenetics and epigenomics, to saying, like, a lot of that guesswork is out of it. And now we'll be able to actually give you some answers. So that's how I would say it. It's an approach of understanding what science is and what it isn't.
And so with the way research and science is going, and more people are starting to really buy into it, but then you still have that fine line of the bro science. Yeah. I know as grad students we've talked about it a lot, but do you still think there's a time where you just pick and choose your battles? Sometimes it's not even worth trying to fight all the bro science.
Yeah. Well, I actually will answer a little bit differently, where I think that it's even it's a bit arrogant on our part to speak down on the bro science, because we have to understand, do we really understand why they're doing that? For example, okay, maybe our science has shown this is a bad approach or this is a better approach, but we still don't know if that person who's doing it actually responds better to what they're doing. We don't know what their training background is, their whole situation. So I think it's a bit tough for me. I don't really clown on that stuff because, you know, for example, okay, say you've done a bunch of studies yourself in your lab on muscle hypertrophy. Have you actually ever trained someone though? And if you haven't, I think you should probably be just as quiet as the bro science person, because there is an impossible line there of saying, okay, have you actually implemented this stuff? Because I promise you, I've worked with a lot of athletes in a lot of spaces, and we have done tons of things that I would scientifically say don't work. And there is a barrage of reasons. I mean, I have an athlete right now getting ready to, has a UFC fight in Mexico City, which is at like a mile plus elevation, and she's wearing an elevation training mask in her training. And there's a bunch of reasons why she's doing it. And now it's funny because a lot of people are commenting and stuff like, wow, bro science, don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, no, idiot, you don't know what I'm doing. Just because you don't know why doesn't mean I don't know why, and I know why. So I think we have to be careful with dissuading that bro science stuff. And I think a better approach is saying like, okay, science is saying maybe that this is not the good approach, but I wonder what possible benefits would come out of that, or why would you do that? Why do you think that athlete's doing that, or that person on Facebook's doing it? So to me, that's the better answer at this stage, because like what Jimmy said, this is only as we know it now. And in 5 years, we might realize, oh, I guess that stupid supersetting thing was actually better. Damn. So just be a bit careful on that one.
Yeah, and I think that people, well, there's like two different kinds of science. There's applied science, right, where you're just looking at an outcome and find out what happens. Like, so what's the best training program for hypertrophy? But then there's the basic science, like, well, how is that training program working? And I think the applied stuff always kind of comes before the basic stuff. So there's been people, lifting certain ways for 50, 100 years. Mm-hmm. We had no idea how it works, and now we're finally starting to figure out how this is working, and maybe we can fine-tune it to make it a little bit better based on the mechanistic approach.
Sure.
So
I was thinking about where, like, if we were, because it always scares me if there's a lack of innovation. So I think we need to always. Like, we can't sit and wait for position statements. Me as a practitioner, I can't say, well, the NSCA doesn't have a position statement on it yet, so I can't do anything about it. So where should we get the ideas for innovation? Because I'm always looking for someone who's doing something differently. Someone who's going to, like, well, that's different from what I've seen. I want to know why, and I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. So what role do we as practitioners have in deciding what we're going to do and how we're going to do stuff? Is it cool because it's just fun and I've motivated that athlete or I've motivated that person? Yeah. What role do we play?
I mean, I think some of the innovation comes from the bro science, like, wow, what did they do? It worked. Let's figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, some of the innovation doesn't even come from science itself. We're just kind of picking up the slack. Like, if you look at some of Brad Schoenfeld's stuff out in New York, he's doing the high rep, low weight or low intensity hypertrophy stuff, and it's like that's totally counterintuitive to what everybody's been taught for however many years, but it seems to work. Why? And now we're on that,
Yeah, I would say that there are certainly some people that are extremely innovative in the field. To give a few names, Brian McKenzie is a good friend of mine, super innovative, and he did things probably 10 years ago that everyone was telling him was so stupid, and the research showed that you can't train strength and conditioning or endurance at the same time. And then he was showing it with thousands and thousands of athletes, and all of a sudden, boom, the science caught up and showed, man, like, damn it, he was right. So a couple things. Yeah, the innovation should probably come from the practitioners. And to me, then the need for innovation comes when we have a new or unique problem. That's when we innovate. You do have to walk a fine line, though, of being innovative simply for the sake of innovation. Yeah. Like the famous quote of, you want a new idea, go read an old book. Like, you go back and read some of the strength and conditioning textbooks from the 50s and 60s, not that they had textbooks, but old books. I mean, go look at the old classic, things that were published. And I think my favorite book was, what was it called, like Getting Big Arms or Big Legs or something. It's great, right? But if you look at their stuff and you're like, wow, this stuff is dialed. And I can't tell you how many times we'll think of some new mechanism for muscle or something, and then you find out like somebody proposed this in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. Like, damn, how did somebody think about that? We just thought of this thing. So we have to be careful. There are a lot of ideas that are already out there. We should probably spend a little bit of time reading the people that have been doing it for 40 years. But if we do have a new situation, a new problem, perhaps then we seek innovation. But there's a lot of knowledge already out there, especially in this field.
So how are you managing your schedule of being professors at these universities, but also having the time to go either train the athletes you work with or come out to Southern California to do some collaboration? How do you balance and manage that schedule?
Well, it's been kind of difficult for me. I mean, I'm only going in my second year as faculty, so I was in school for like my whole life. And when you're in school, you've always kind of got a routine. I got these classes I got to go do. I got to go to work. I got to do this, and it's just kind of already built for you almost. But now, there's nobody telling me what to do. I mean, Obviously, I have to go to class, or I have to teach class. I have to go to meetings. There's like I have to go to meetings. I have to attend meetings. Maybe not always attend. I'm in the meeting like on my phone. No, but so you have certain responsibilities, but then outside of that, it's up to you to be creative and do your research, mentor students, and all that. And it's just you got to have a calendar. I was just looking over at Andy's calendar. I mean, you have a full calendar all the time. And that's the only way to do it. You just kind of balance it.
Yeah. I would say take inspiration from a couple of people. I haven't used too many of his things, but he certainly got me thinking about this. Tim Ferriss is a good name for this. I would recommend everyone read or listen to his book, The 4-Hour Workweek.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, if you haven't, this is your new thing. Don't listen to a single song on your iPod ever again. Put that away until you finish his audiobook or buy it and read it. I actually do things totally different than he does, but he at least got me thinking in the right mind frame of can I question some of these assumptions? In other words, should I wake up at 4 a.m. and get work done, or should I be up till midnight? There's nothing magical about either one of those hours. What you have to do is figure out, when do you get your creativity done the most? When are you the most creative? Okay. So you're the most creative in the afternoon after lunch? Well, then set those scheduled hours out to where you do not answer emails. You do not take phone calls. Your email is shut down. Your phone is turned off during those hours. Or when do you do your mindless tasks the best? You got to grade 100 of these things, or you got to answer all these quick emails. And then you need to organize your life so that you can do things in bulk like that. And so you can look over right now on my screen, and you'll see my email is up. My email is only up during certain hours of the day. I will answer them at certain times, but I will never have that email going when I'm trying to write a manuscript. Because it'll be this. And you're never going to get thoughts. So you have to figure out the different tasks you have to do. That usually boils down to creation, either long length but not a lot of complex tasks, and different things in your life. And then you try to figure out what time you do the best. So for me, I'm a morning person. I'd rather wake up at 4 a.m. and sleep at 8 p.m. Some people like to be up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever. Neither one of those is better than the other one. Some people want to be up at 7 a.m., take a 3-hour nap in the afternoon. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. Those are all assumptions someone else has told you are good. You should emulate someone who wakes up at 5 a.m. No, you shouldn't. If you're a night person, you should sleep till 10. You need to feel good. So that's for me what I do is I try to figure out when do I do certain tasks the best, and then those are just non-negotiable for me. So I don't care if a student comes in, I'm sorry, I have set myself, I'm going to work on this manuscript from 2 to 4 because that's when I did this well. You're going to have to come back another time. So I set all my life up. I try to set my schedule, my classes that day. I told you earlier I'm a bit of an introvert. What I've actually found is I personally do not work well all day long if I have an exchange with somebody. So I actually like to work with other people early in the morning, and then I want to be introverted the rest of the day. So I want to be done with people by like 11 a.m., and then I will crush work. But if I wake up and I'm at home by myself and I'm like, oh, it's 10 a.m., like that's when social media comes out for me, because I want that person-to-person exchange, and it took me a long time to figure that out. So I will always set up podcasts or phone calls with athletes or whatever for as early as possible as I can in the morning. Then I feel good, I've had human exchange, and then I can kind of recluse back into my office and just crush things with no one around. So
yeah, and you want to set yourself up for success with the location that you're working too, I think, because I tried a little bit of everything. When I first started working, I started working from home, and it works for a while, and then you're like, I wonder what's in the refrigerator. I wonder some people can work at home just fine, yeah. But I find that I work better at a coffee shop. Actually, tonight I'm going to be at the airport for like 3 hours. I'll probably get more work done at the airport than I would a whole day, because there's nobody bothering. Not that people are bothering me, but I can just focus in. I like the ambient noise. Some people hate ambient noise, and they just can't even deal with somebody talking. So just set yourself up for success with where you're working too. Yeah,
that's actually a good point, because there are actually some tasks I do that I need to be the white room, absolutely silence, no distractions at all. For me, that's writing. Right? I can't write with anything else going on. But there are some tasks I do way better when, like, Natasha's in the room watching TV. And so I figured out, like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to try to write when she's watching TV, or else, like, I'm going to drive myself nuts. But I'm never going to answer emails in a room by myself with no noise on. Because then I get bored as hell, and I'm like, oh, this is awful. But I would crush 100 emails in 2 minutes if I'm on the couch while she's watching TV or she's in the kitchen doing stuff. So I just figured out, like, and it took me a while to realize that, but just start paying attention to the tasks. And when you find yourself being like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this, change the environment and see if that helps. And then you know, okay, I'm going to always do these things in these situations. I always go to my coffee shop to work on my classes or whatever it happens to be. And then you'll learn, you'll get excited for that. You're like, hell yeah, it's email day. Like, that means I get to watch the baseball game while I'm crushing emails. And what I'll find is I'll never even look up at the screen. I'll never even be there. But if I tried to write, I'd be watching the game the whole time. So, you know, I'm not like, don't do exactly what I just did. Like, that's just what works for me. Just pay attention and try different things. Figure it out.
So how do you determine, because I've always thought about this, and this is what we talked before when we were off air. How do you set yourself apart in, like, a lot of people work and I put in 8 hours of work today, but how do you make it an effective, efficient day where you've accomplished something on that day? Or how do you make sure that you're checking the boxes and, yeah, that set me up for success tomorrow, or you're doing the little task that ultimately, incrementally, will result in something being accomplished?
Yeah, I always make lists. I kind of have always done it, whether it's on a scratch piece of paper. Now I have a little bit more of a method where I have my list on my screen, and then I just tag things off of that. But then I also have the big list on the wall of stuff that's going to happen over the next year. And if it gets getting to, you know, close to a talk that's going to happen next month, I'm like, oh, we got to get on this now. And then my little list gets a little bit more detailed with stuff like that. So I think it's just figuring out what works for you as far as organization. Because I was not an organized person in undergrad. I just happened to be just bright enough to pass and do fine. You know, I never had any list. I was just like going for it. But now there's no way I can get through my day without at least having to check the boxes off, literally check them off.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple things on that one, Albert. You actually mentioned it already, and that is identifying the difference between effective and efficient. So you could be, I think the analogy you used earlier, Albert, was you could be super efficient at digging a hole in your backyard, but if you didn't need a hole in your backyard, that's not a very effective use of your time. So I could be the most efficient email answerer ever, but if I just answered emails all day and didn't actually get anything done, that wouldn't be an effective use of my time. And so for me, and that's a Tim Ferriss thing, effective versus efficient. But for me, it's also about saying, okay, I will try to organize certain days for certain tasks. So in the business world, they call this a buffer day. So for example, Fridays tend to be buffer days. So I don't like working on Friday. I will do a buffer day, which means that's the day that I clean my inbox out. That's the day I do those 20-minute letter of recommendations I got to knock out. I got to do this little task. I don't really want to do it. And I crush those things. So when Monday morning walks in, I don't have all this stuff lingering around. I don't try to do a 20-minute task every single day. My Tuesdays generally are wide open. I generally want absolutely nothing on my plate on Tuesdays, because that's the only day I have to get things done. And so on Tuesdays, I try to batch myself out 90-minute increments, and then I'll take a break, walk the dogs, go whatever, move around. Maybe that's a phone call time. I don't try to work for 8 straight hours on Tuesday. I know that's not going to work. I'm going to get burned out. But I also know, like, I'm not going to answer an email on Tuesday because that's going to interrupt. And I'm going to pick that task, that email task, over the more important task, which is maybe put in 8 hours onto a project that's going to take me 800 that I need to chip away at over the next year. Maybe that's a grant. That's a paper we're struggling with. I'm playing with data all day. But if I don't say, look, I got an hour and a half to do this, I'm going to end up picking a task that gives me a check mark, because you want to see the check off the list. You want to see that thing gone. And so that's two things I'll do. Is there are days when I do all my little tasks, and I call them buffer days. And there are days, like, again, that's Tuesday for me mostly, where I'm like, this is my big project day. This is the day where I'm going to, if I didn't literally get anything done today, I'm fine with it. Maybe I'm going to play with the graph for 5 hours because I'm worried about quality. But I don't want a checklist on those days. I want to be free to explore and not to be pressed by time. Where Mondays or Wednesdays, oh my gosh, I want a very clear check. You have 30 minutes to do this task, and then it's over with. And then you're not on the next one. You have 25 minutes for this one, 15, an hour for this one. And that keeps me very crushing Mondays, like knocking things out. So my Mondays always feel good for me because I'm like, man, I got 40 things done. My Tuesdays don't necessarily feel as productive because I'll literally might not do anything. Nothing will be off my list off Tuesday, but I'll have thought about something for a lot of time or worked on something. And so I'm okay with that now because I know Tuesday's not a check off the box day. Tuesday is a work in this space. But Monday, if I didn't check things off the list, that was bad Monday.
Now I know when I need to reach out to you what days to email and contact you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck on Tuesday. Good luck on Sunday night. See how fast that gets back to you.
So as far as, so we've been talking about work and balancing all that, what do you guys do outside to decompress, to not even, to look outside of research and do other things? You probably surfing?
Well, yeah, living in San Francisco, there's infinity things to do. You would never be bored, but no matter where you're at, I think if you have, something you like to do exercise-wise or fitness-wise, obviously do that. I think also outside of work, I like to socialize too. I'm not necessarily a extroverted person, but I like to be around people talking, hanging out. So I have a group of friends that we get together 2 or 3 times a week, and that's like really important to me. And I think if I had, if it was between getting this paper done or whatever, and I had 30 minutes to kill, I would rather just hang out with a friend and talk to them at the end of the day than just try to do that.
Yeah. This is going to sound cheesy, but I totally don't mean this to be cheesy. We're pretty fortunate where the things that we do outside are the things that we do inside,
that's true.
Which is sort of like, so for me, it really comes down to perspective of myself. So the same exact task can be aggravating and fatiguing for me, and it can also be my release.
Yeah.
And so what that means to me is it's all about how I frame my mind around the task. So sometimes, like on a Saturday, I'll be like, man, I feel so good. Like I want to answer emails or I want to work on a PowerPoint because I'm really excited about it, having fun, and that'll totally decompress me. But if I feel like I didn't put myself in the right perspective of it, and I feel like I have to get it done for work or it's a project I don't really want to do, then all of a sudden that's draining. And so for me, what that ends up being is I have to understand, I have to recognize that emotion and deal with it and acknowledge it and say, okay, you know what? You're really not wanting to work on this talk right now? Don't do it. Don't do it. And if that's Tuesday, if that's Wednesday or Monday or Saturday, I don't do it. Because I know sometime that inspiration for that talk's going to hit me. And then at that point, I drop whatever I'm doing. That email can wait. That grading those exams can wait. You've got the wave. My friend Chris would always call it riding the wave. I mean, you got the wave for this paper. You got the wave for this thing too. Go. Don't jump off the wave. The waves are good, man. It's like literally Saturday.
Yeah.
We're going to do some stuff. And he's like, the waves are good in San Clemente. I'm out of here. Like, all right, man. Like, go ride the waves. So I know I have a bit of a wiggle room right there where when things, and that for me is to decompress and all finished, I'll be like Saturday, I'll be like, sweet, man, I'm so happy this is done. I had fun all day. And Natasha will be like, you worked all day. Like, no, not really. Like, I played with some PowerPoint or, I worked on this thing, like, or I called an athlete or we played with whatever. So it's a lot the same. Yeah, those are generally my decompression strategies. This is getting myself away. Or outside of that, it's watching the Mariners, watching the Seahawks for me. A win's a win, baby. A win is a win. We'll take it.
So is there someone sometimes we'll have a training partner and we have an off day, but we know we need to get stuff accomplished. So is there someone who just they have an infectious enthusiasm and you can always count on them to get you excited about whatever project? Because sometimes I get wrapped up in what Jimmy's got to say. I'm like, dude, epigenetics, that's awesome. It sounds like the greatest thing ever. And then when he's gone, I don't generally have that same enthusiasm.
Excited about epigenetics because it is pretty cool.
And then quit.
Yeah, and then quit. We need to talk about it more. Yeah. That's the thing about working with students. It's kind of fun because students have a lot of energy. And on low energy days for me, when I'm like tired, just did a 3-hour lecture, sometimes I'll schedule meetings with grad students post-lecture or something because I know I'm going to be like fried, but I know that they'll have a lot to say, a lot to talk about, and then it'll get me back kind of ramped up again. You know what I mean? So I think being around students is a big thing for me. If I was around people that were bored the whole time, it would just be miserable. So.
Yeah, I would fully agree. It's sort of funny because Natasha and I are pretty much polar opposites. The days that I want to really train, that I come home and I'm like ready to go, she's always like, we're not working out today. And I feel like every day she's that day, I'm the day where I'm like, no, my knee hurts. I'm tired. So she's not the answer for that one, and she would agree. I promise. But for me, honestly, like I tailor my social media, particularly my Twitter feed, for that exactly. I'm very careful with who I select to follow on Twitter. And I don't just follow people because they post awesome bikini pictures or food pictures or whatever. I follow the people. That's what I use my Twitter feed for. It's my news feed. And so that's when I'll like cruise on there and be like, oh, see a new paper on satellite cells or something. That's when I'll get excited, and then that'll give me the juice again. So I understand what I use Twitter for and what I use Instagram for and what I don't use them for. I'll freely admit, I use social media probably too much. I definitely know Natasha would agree on that one. But that's what I truly go for. So when I'm I'll try to go to Twitter, but that can be a double-edged sword too, because what ends up happening is that's your easy distraction. And so you're like, okay, one sentence Twitter, like one sentence Twitter, like did you need to check? Like I'm sure the Mariners didn't trade you in the last 30 seconds. You don't need to recheck the website. Like relax, which is a problem for me. So that's one thing I'm working on for sure.
So who do you follow on Twitter?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I know we were talking about that with Tony too, and people he follows on Twitter. Are there any people that you suggest to follow? Because I definitely use Twitter for the same reason as just kind of like the news feed, especially for science. Is there anyone you suggest?
Besides Jimmy?
Yeah, just follow us, right?
Yeah.
I follow a bunch of different ones. There's I actually follow, this sounds really nerdy, but I follow a lot of our scientific journals.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't necessarily, so for example, I don't want them in my RSS feed. I don't want an email coming out every day from them. But I do want to see all the papers coming from them, so I just want to organize under my time. So I will follow Journal of Physiology, Applied Physiology, all those things. So I get a quick glance of the papers that come out without jamming up my inbox and my work schedule. So I check that on my time. Science Alert is another cool one. I don't even know who really organizes or runs it, but it's just a bunch of awesome science stuff. That's really cool. And then I follow people that are in the field that really inspire me, that are sort of doing things that I like to follow. Again, like a Brian McKenzie, who I work with a lot. I don't even necessarily follow all the athletes I work with because they're not posting anything of importance to me. So those are the ones that I'm after. Who else do I follow on Twitter a lot? A lot of like dietitians and people that are just outside of my space. So people that do research in nutrition and stuff, which is something I want to keep a close loop on, but I'm not going to see them every day. And the last category I'll give you are coaches that I think are really innovative. So these are people not doing research at all. Like I have my friend, I think his Twitter handle is DDN5 or something terrible like that. He's probably had Twitter since like 2000. But Dave Delanavi is fantastic. I think he thinks really, really well. He's just a coach, barely even a coach. He's just really, I like the way he thinks. And so I'll follow people who maybe aren't necessarily in the field, but even if it's a totally different field, science, politics, if I just like the way they approach problem solving and like the way that they have perspective, that's who I'll follow.
I think another way you can get curated information that I do too is I use like Google News, and then I have hot words that come out. So you may be getting some science that's a couple weeks late or something, but usually it'll link to an article that has a paper. So if you just have like epigenetics plus muscle, maybe every 3 months something will come out in the news about that, and I'm like, I should probably read this because it seems to be popular with the general public or whatever. So that's a good way to do it too, I think, is through the news outlets as well.
Yeah. Yes. Two other names I just came up with. I just checked my Twitter, that's why. Zach Evanesh is really good. Zach is a strength coach in the Northeast. He's up there, and he does primarily high school kids. But he's, one, phenomenally motivating, two, just really, really, really smart, and I like the way he puts on there. I think his Twitter is @ZEven, EVEN-esh, ESCH, Zach Evanesh. He's phenomenal, as well as Travis Mash. Travis Mash is a weightlifting coach, former world record holder, powerlifter. I think it's Mash Elite or something like that, Travis Mash. This is great, but people like that are really good coaches that I like. Jill Miller is another girl I like. She runs a company called Yoga Tune Up, which is not yoga. It's really movement, mobility sort of stuff with a yoga-ish twinge. I think it's Yoga Tune Up or Jill Miller, something like that. You can find them. Those are great ones I like. Of course, Kelly Starrett's stuff. Like I like all those people. So I generally use that as to follow people that I don't see in my day-to-day life to keep me perspective, so I don't get locked in my box. So the people that are in my field, I don't necessarily follow them because I'm going to see their stuff anyways.
So you're fully acknowledging that if you're around the same people, you're creating an echo chamber for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Especially nowadays when all the fields are starting to really come together, and the best way to innovate sometimes is to combine fields. So, like you said, nutrition. I mean, I know a little bit about nutrition, but if I wanted to collaborate with somebody doing some kind of studies, supplement studies or something, I would definitely have to follow, different fields besides of our own. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that do that handle social media, that like Jimmy and I have, that are scientists, like Brad Schoenfeld. He doesn't do Twitter, I don't think, but he's really active on his Facebook. And I'm very inactive on Facebook, but I am friends with Brad on there because I do know he will interact, so I can go to his page and see what he's been up to, and he's always putting a tremendous amount of things up there. There's other folks that are interactive, like Keith Barr used to be interactive on Twitter. I don't know if he is anymore. But you can figure out who's kind of up to date on stuff, which is nice, and then kind of reach out to them. There are some people like Brett's pretty interactive on Instagram. Brett Contreras. So like you figure out where they want to go and then kind of go there for them, which I think is good. Yeah, you're always trying to keep outside of yourself, for sure.
What questions should practitioners be asking scientists? I mean, you've got your foot in, well, at least Dr. Galpin, you've got your foot in a practitioner field as well as a scientist. But I guess this is more directed to Jimmy. What should we be asking you as a scientist, and maybe you can fill in the gap, Dr. Galpin?
Sure.
Well, I think I get a lot of questions of stuff that I have no idea about. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of people think if you're a scientist that you know a little bit about everything.
Yeah.
And I would consider myself like, this is what is it? You want to be like a T person. So you want to have a little basic knowledge across all fields, and then you want to be really deep into one thing. So if somebody asks me a question that I don't know about, I could probably find it in my T and then maybe come back and help them out a little bit. But I would say be pretty specific with your question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll probably come out and be like, I don't know, but I can find somebody who does know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe, and maybe I won't know at all. So.
Yeah. I'll add to that one too, Albert. That in general, the most questions I ask or can help people with is helping practitioners understand the scientific process, and I don't mean like the method we use in the lab or stats or anything. What I generally mean is, okay, I give them the recommendation to go out and try stuff on your own and see what works, right? But then we don't coach them on how that process works. So, okay, I went out and I did this program. How do I know if it worked or not? Well, that's where you can learn from science is, okay, so did you do some baseline testing? Did you test under the same conditions? Oh, no, the night before, the first time you didn't sleep. Now this time you slept for 12 hours. Okay, then we don't. So that, I think, is what they should ask the scientists are, how I want to run a self-experiment. Help me do this so that it's the most reliable, and how far different does it have to be, and what should I do on the day before? I think that's where I can help people the most, is understanding that basic stuff so that you can run your own self-experiment.
So how do you get athletes, or how are these athletes reaching out to you to have you program for them, or do that?
Well, number one, I try not to ever program. That's terrible. If you're not going to be on the field with them, a program is useless. Or online coaching. Online coaching is fine too. I don't do any of that. It's, for me, that's one of the things that, actually going back to earlier in the podcast, that's one thing that I identified that is a big, massive investment of time for a very, very limited payoff. And, like Jimmy just set up, I'm not the best in the world at programming. And so if it's a real high-level athlete, I've got friends like my friend PJ Nestler. I found him, 3 or 4 years ago or something, and I'm like, dude, you are better than I am at programming. I'm just going to send every athlete that I have to you, because I just don't have that skill set like you have, and I could, but it would be a huge investment in my time and a tiny bit of payout. When I'd have to factor in, am I motivating them? Are they doing the exercises right? Are they doing the right order? What else do they do? So, number one, it's about outsourcing for me with that type of stuff. And so for me, it's just helping them find the right person to work with, and then helping them make sure that they make decisions along the way. So this is the situation. Okay, what should I do now? Should I do this or this? Okay, boom, go in this direction. So for me, that's how I do it. I don't remember your original question. Was it how they reach out to me?
Yeah.
It just depends. Most of the time it's an email. They'll find my email somewhere, or get a phone call, and that usually is word of mouth. I don't particularly reach out to athletes because I've got a full-time job already. But I like to do that in special situations. I just had one reach out this weekend that I said no, and that happens more often than I say yes. I'm very choosy with those things, but it's usually via email or social media. They'll send me a message on Twitter, on Facebook. That's the bulk of it. Occasionally I'll get a random phone call, but it's almost always an email or a social media message. Or one of their coaches. Their coaches will reach out and say, here's the situation, can you help us help her, or help us help him? That's probably, honestly, more of it than anything.
And with your program design class, are you still getting guest speakers coming in? Because I thought, being in that class, that was kind of cool, seeing all those different people within the field.
Who came in? You were there. Do you remember?
Marin Sorelli.
Uh-huh.
I think Bermuda.
Oh, Dennis Bermudez?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Pat Cummins.
Yeah.
Rob Lemiento. Yeah, I try to have a variety of people in there. I try to bring in people that are real experts in program design. I got some really cool ones coming up this semester that I can't tell you about. But some real good ones. I try to get weightlifting coaches or strength coaches or endurance coaches. And then I also always try to get somebody who maybe is not even necessarily into coaching, but can help people understand how do I get from an undergrad to world class. And so that might mean a professional athlete, or that might mean an entrepreneur or a CEO, but they can go, hey, look, I was an undergrad too. I had a 3.0 GPA or a 2.8 GPA, or I failed, or whatever. And here's the steps I took to get from here to not good, not making 30,000, being world class, to winning world championships, gold medals, which is it's a mystifying process, but it's really not. So I think it's an important message for people to say, like, I just took this step, and then I took another step, and then another one. You know, I didn't have a 4.0 at MIT, and then go, it's like I failed chemistry too the first time, and then I run a chemistry lab or whatever.
So what projects are you working on currently? Because it sounds like you always have a lot of stuff going on, but what do you currently have going on?
Should I get the board?
Yeah, we have the board going. We both have a lot of stuff going on. The one thing that's going on up in San Francisco right now is I have a collaboration. We talked about collaboration going on with Stanford that I just kind of, again, fell into. Met a guy.
That's a good story, man. You should tell it.
I met a guy, and he happened to be a surfer, and we got to talking. I invited him over to give a lecture at our university. He was a postdoc at Stanford. He invited me to give a lecture over there at the VA hospital. Sat down with the PI, the primary investigator of this study, and they're like, we like this fiber typing stuff you're doing. We want to add you to our grant and do a little fiber typing part. And so Andy and I are doing this collaboration with them. But again, it's like I wasn't looking for this, but it happened to end up finding me or whatever. But because I reached out too to have this guy come and talk, and then I went there, and you never know. Half the time you'll go and do something, and you'll end up with nothing. Well, more than half the time, probably 90%. But 10% of the time, if it works out, it could end up being a pretty big deal. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that was actually good. So I'm not going to answer your question at all, Albert.
Yeah.
But I want to follow up on what Jimmy just said, because I think that's an important part of it. Is when something like that did fall into your lap. The only reason it worked is because, one, you pursued it.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't reach out necessarily. You didn't put a post on your Facebook. Or you didn't call Stanford and say, hey, I want to collaborate. And the reason why he didn't do that, and the reason why that would have not worked, is because Stanford would answer the phone and said, oh, okay, you're bringing nothing to the table. You're calling Stanford because you want your name on a Stanford grant. You're out. And it would be the same thing if you walked up to a girl at a bar. They immediately go into defense mode. You are trying to get something from me. You're trying to take from me. I see this. I'm up defensive shell.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing he did was say, no, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Like, I'm going to do something for you. And didn't even play the do something for me back card. It was, hey, it'd be great to come out to give a talk. It'd be great for my students. It was a selfless act that only took Jimmy time. It helped his students. It benefited kids. Mm-hmm. And it made this researcher feel important and special. right? And then after that, I was like, wow, this was great. You're a good dude, Jimmy. I'd love to collaborate. Tell me more about what you're doing. Oh, okay, great. Actually, we'd love to bring you on. So that's an important pitch, whether you're talking to a collaborator or a faculty member or anyone that's a quote unquote above you. Whether that means make more money than you or the opposite gender or the same gender for that matter, I guess. Like whatever it is you're trying to get, it's okay. Are you pitching immediately? In other words, like, are you selling me? Are you trying to sell me? Well, people don't want to be sold to. They're going to put up a defensive shell. So if you walk into my door and immediately start talking about some stuff I got to do for you, like that door's getting shut. I'm not in. I'm too big. I'm just about hitting you in the face like 7 times. Sorry.
Just getting excited here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's come in and say, okay, like, no, I want to do something for you, and at least it has to appear selfless. And if it can actually be selfless, that's going to be a win. That genuine selflessness is going to help.
I think people are really perceptive to if you're genuine or not too. Like if you're selfless, if you're humble, if you go into it like, this is what I do. I like what you guys do. I think we should work together. Like honestly, if you go into it, be like, this would look really good on my resume. I totally needed. Like I don't even have the resume on my mind.
That's going to come through.
Yeah, until after it's all done, I'll be like, that does look pretty good. Like it's just. Yeah. That's like in the back. Because I am genuinely interested in the project, I wanted to see how it turns out.
Well, the cool thing is, and no one would know that if we weren't at Ballast Point on, was it Thursday night?
Yeah.
Okay. When you're talking about you're wrapping up that day, and you're just like, yeah, it'll be cool. I got someone into Stanford graduate school, and I think if people realized how authentic you are about that, that they would realize, I'm like, that's a good dude. I want to work with that person. I think that's. It's exceptional. I don't know how many people really authentically look out for themselves like that, or look out for their students like that. Excuse me.
But it's a symbiotic thing, like always. If you're looking out for your students and then they go on to be amazing, I hope all my students go on to be way better stuff than I'm doing.
Sure.
Because that's like, it's not like, oh, I mentored them this, that. It's like, no, now I have a friend that's like the boss at Yale University or whatever. Like, it's just. You just keep growing your network and just stay positive, and
Which is actually circles back to one of the original questions of how do you network. When you're an introvert like me, you don't want to go up and ask people. The easier way is actually just start with the people that are already at your level or below you. Do something nice for somebody that needs your help. Right? Now, one, that's just simply service, but two, that person might be the person who leapfrogs you really quickly. That is the CEO that has the strength conditioning facility, that knows what they're doing nutrition-wise, or something that automatically can help you. So. Whenever you ask for something that you want, you have to ask the question like, well, what have I done for someone that I didn't do because they were paying me or because I wanted to work in their lab? Like, what have you just done for the sake that actually just helps somebody? And if you're not doing that, and when people are coming at you with help, are you shutting them down because you're only trying to look up? Like a good example is, you're at a party, and someone comes up to you that works at a gas station. Do you shut that person down and not have a conversation with that person? Because you're like, well, I'm here to try to meet this one researcher, like, well, or not. Okay. Tim Ferriss gave a great example of this. When he was young and up and coming, he went to a conference called South by Southwest. This big, huge thing, right, with all these CEOs. And he's a young, up and coming entrepreneur, essentially. And he's trying to get into a conversation with somebody. I don't know, Richard Branson or someone. And he's in a room that Richard Branson is hosting a party of. What do you think every single person in that room is trying to do? They're trying to pitch Richard Branson, right? Or whoever it was. I'm making the name up. And so he's automatically in defense mode the entire time, right? He's thinking pitch after pitch. And so Tim struck up a conversation with the bartender or the host, I think the party host. Has a half-an-hour conversation with her, whatever. Ends up turning out that's Richard Branson's sister-in-law or something.
Uh-oh.
Because he had that great conversation with his sister. So, I mean, that's how you start your networking. Is like, okay, don't instead of looking up all the time, are you nice to all the people in your class? When that one kid did you not answer their email? Did you go out of your way to be really nice and sweet to all the people around you? Because one of them is going to turn out to win it all.
Yeah, that's what you said one time when Andy came to my class to talk just about life and everything like we're talking about now. But he said, there's 35 people in this room. One of you is going to be a millionaire at least. I mean, especially where we live and stuff. Probably 2 people might be millionaires. So, how many people do you know the first and last name in your classes? Maybe 2 or 3. Like, you're there for 3 hours a day all at the same time. You might as well get together after or before. I know Albert, that's how we got to be friends. We met up after class and we were just hanging out, and
Yeah.
And 9 hours in the cold room a day too, though. You had at least 6 hours a day in the cold room to collect data for your thesis. We've been on for an hour, guys. So if you guys need to get gone, just feel free to let us know.
Yeah, I got a meeting. So
I think we got to get rolling probably, but this was fun. We could talk all day.
I know, that's what I was thinking too, but I know that you have a lot of demands on your time.
Yeah.
Because it's Monday, right? You got to get that checklist done.
I got a data meeting here at 1, so.
But,
All right.
Well,
I guess this is a question that we always ask everyone. Just kind of any last piece of advice that you may have for grad students or undergrads listening, how to be successful, something that they should do.
I think you're breaking up, but I kind of got the gist for our undergrads what they should do. I think just keep doing things, and you're going to fail, and failure is not bad. Failure, like Andy said, have thick skin, get used to it. Like, just keep doing stuff. If it doesn't work, try something else. If it doesn't work, try something else. Because if you stop and give up, you're done. So.
Yeah, I would say at the undergrad or grad level, or even at my level, honestly, at Jimmy's level, when I still feel like we haven't quite made it yet. So we're still on the uphill climb. At this point in your career, your answer is always yes. It is every single opportunity, whether that means Saturday night, Tuesday morning, another thing. You don't necessarily see the benefit in something directly. Right? So someone wants you to grade their exams, or stay in extra early, or set up the lab, or they want you to do the dishes, whatever it is. Your answer is always yes, and do it with as much detail and as organization as possible. If you do enough right things for enough nice things for enough nice people, eventually one of those is going to come back with benefit. And I'll tell this story very quickly, but a large reason of why I'm here is because of my former undergraduate mentor. And so she had wanted to start a little health desk and take blood pressure for people at her campus walking by. She said, does anyone want to do this? And I had no interest in taking blood pressure, and I said yes. And she's like, great, you know how to do blood pressure? And I said no. She's like, phenomenal. And I was scared. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to screw this up. I had to throw myself out there. So I ended up doing it. I sat out in the rain. No one came by. Nothing happened. I wasted like 3 or 4 hours of my day. Like 9 months later, she gets a call from Adidas, their headquarters. They're looking for a new, basically, person to come up and work for them. And she looked. She said, well, I don't know if this guy knows at all about what you need, but I know he's going to be there. He'll be on time. Give this guy a shot. And that was the phone call I got 9 months later. And that made a significant chunk of my life. That gave me my first strength conditioning job in Arizona with professional athletes because they were sponsored by Adidas. They happened to come to campus one day when I was at work. That job, by the way, was an hour and a half away. It started at 5 a.m. in the morning. I was still taking classes, playing football. So my point is, like, the answer is yes. And it doesn't matter if it is $7 an hour and you think you deserve $9. That is irrelevant at this point in your career. Do everything well and be organized, be on time, be ahead of time, and that's what's going to set you up really well right now.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having us. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you.